I don't even know what I'm going to call this. I guess jokingly, I can call this the Storm table because it's not round since we've only got two of us. Welcome
Two-sided
back.
table.
What did you say?
Two-sided table. A little booth.
Yeah, this is
Storm
just
booth.
like the Storm coffee table. I don't have any coffee. Rowan Schaberg and Charles Hamaker here with you. Um, Rowan and I, we were gonna. Oh, I think I said we said on the last Storm roundtable we were gonna try to get another show done on Thursday. Timing didn't work out. Schedules, as I mentioned then, schedules are tough. Real people, right? As Christian said. Um, no Christian here, obviously. So Rowan and I figured we'd get a quick little kind of look back at the first 10 games of the season um, for Seattle and maybe a little bit of a look at Golden State ahead of tomorrow's game because as I joked last time that Rowan did see Golden State in person a little bit. So yeah, Rowan, I mean, I know you and I were looking at some of the statistics um, player by player wise, but I guess what is sticking out to you the most um from the first 10 games of Storm basketball? And I feel like obviously recently it maybe things are feeling a little bit better considering how big that win against Minnesota was that you did also see in person too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like overall, I've been, decently impressed. I think like any team, there are ups and downs, and definitely coming off of Wednesday, it is an up. I think, just looking league wise, I was just kind of quickly going over the league stats, and the Storm are standing out in a lot of categories, which I think is a really good sign at this point in the season. They're 6-4 right now, fifth in the standings currently as of Friday. So that's a pretty good spot to be in. I know that we talked about, I believe it was ESPN that put them at third in the standings, kind of in a power rankings. Not sure if I would agree with that quite yet. I think five seems like a pretty good spot for them right now. I think that we've seen overall, I think that when they're playing well, and when they're not, they're not, which is very simple. And you could say that about any team. But I think really the key to when they are playing well together is when they're distributing the ball well. And on Wednesday, they were just distributing the ball so well. They're actually, let's see, let me find, I have my little list here. They're third in the league in assists right now. Which is really big, and I think that that has been huge for them. I think Gabby Williams always impresses us, but she really impressed me with her assisting abilities. She just seemed to see the court really well on Wednesday, and I think was making a lot of opportunities for other people. And then you have all five starters in double figures, so that's huge. But Gabby was, pretty close to a triple double there with her assists and rebounds and everything. So I think that that was huge. And I think it's interesting when we talk a lot about chemistry and team, just the team working well together. I think a lot of people don't think as much about that when they're talking about people playing on the court. I think it's like, oh, we can keep the off the court stuff and the on the court stuff separate. But I think it's really important to have that. I think that that's why it's been such a big emphasis for them is the team chemistry, because you see that when they are playing well together and they're playing very connected and not playing selfishly, they can beat a undefeated, Minnesota Lynx. So that was huge. I think that that's obviously a big confidence booster for the Storm. You have three players in the top 20 in scoring in the league. That's a really big deal. Skylar Diggins-Smith or Skylar Diggins, excuse me, is at 11. Nneka Ogwumike is at 14 and Gabby Williams is at 18. So that's huge. Again, we've talked about Gabby Williams, her offensive production and how big that's been for the Storm so far. I think my biggest concern, I don't know if we're on concerns yet, but my biggest concern so far is just that scoring being sustainable. I know that we've
Yeah.
talked about this. Erica Wheeler had a huge game on Wednesday. It's really great to see her, being able to be a big offensive threat. But I think that, Gabby has not played any less than 29 minutes all season. And and Erica also has been, carrying a good bit of that offensive load. And I think that, as you look at the kind of average age of the roster that we've talked about, you have Skylar Diggins-Smith, or Skylar Diggins, why am I doing that today? Skylar Diggins and Nneka Ogwumike, scoring really well. However, when you have Erica Wheeler, you have the oldest player in the league with Alicia Clark, and then you have Skylar Diggins and Nneka Ogwumike and Erica Wheeler, who, are all veterans in their own right, playing a lot. It's definitely concerning. And you have Gabby Williams, you're getting I think 34 average minutes out of Gabby Williams a game. So that's definitely a concern. I think, especially with scoring and with minutes. Ezzy Magbagor, we continue to talk about how her offense hasn't been great. I think we saw that on Wednesday, that we can definitely see it hopefully charting upward. She had, season high 12 points. But again, when you're looking at last season versus this season, she had over half of the games that she played in last season. She had 12 or more points. So she's not quite in that same, offensive production that she was. And as a young player, I think that will be really needed for her to take on some of that offensive load as the season continues.
Yeah, I think sort of my biggest things to look at with this first 10 games of the season is that, Seattle's got a starting five, I think, that can go head to head with anybody. It's just the bench that kind of leaves the questions, right? So it's like, yeah, like I'm not concerned about your starting five. It's funny that you say that. While we're doing this, ESPN has put out their grades for teams and given Seattle a B plus, which I'd agree with that. B plus. Um, I think yeah, the scoring isn't sustainable because as Christian and I, as you and I, as we've all talked about at times, like we haven't outside of the Minnesota game, and even then it didn't really happen that much because Gabby only had, I believe, 12. You haven't gotten your like top three in Skylar, Nneka, and Gabby to really get hot at the right time, right? Because as we look here with Skylar Diggins, she started the season with three consecutive games, 20 points. She ranks top 12 in scoring at 17.8 points per game, a 6.4 assists per game, which is tied for third in the league. Um, you know, wow, she ranks sixth among guards in average points in the paint. Um,
That's a fun stat.
yeah, as we get ready for All-Star voting here. It's she was on a hot pace to start the season. She kind of had a quieter run towards the end of May and the start of June, but really strong game this past time out as she made some history. I think what was it became the fastest player in WNBA history to reach 5,000 points and 1,500 career assists at 300 in two games, and the Storm just reposted it. But I believe she made another mark in that regard with that no one in the WNBA has recorded. Oh yeah, faster than Sky. Yes, okay. So I did get that right. You know, um, so she's been really hot to start the year outside of that little stretch, and she bounced back. Nneka, I mean, she also those two started really hot, right, to begin the year. It felt like we were looking at two MVP candidates. Um, you know, um, she got her first double double. Like Christian mentioned on our last post game report, it felt like she was a double double machine last year, but she had her first double double, no, second double double, sorry, in that win over Minnesota. She's been really big still. It seemed like she was an MVP candidate until a kind of a string of tough games. And then you've got Gabby, who, like, yeah, as you mentioned, it feels like anytime Gabby Williams, we talk about Gabby Williams, it's just how tremendously she impacted the game in one way or the other. And so far that year, it's been her 3-point shooting. It wasn't against Minnesota. She didn't make one against Minnesota, but she became the second player in WNBA history to shoot better than 80% from 3-point range with at least 7 assists and no turnovers in a single game. So that's pretty remarkable. Um, she's averaging a career high in points, field goals made, assists, steals, blocks, field goal percentage, and 3-point percentage. So yeah, I mean, you get those three click consistently, you're going to be a problem. As you mentioned with Ezzy, we see her continue an upwards trend. And I'm hoping that game against Minnesota, again, one of the top two teams in the league with New York, like that's a confidence builder for Ezzy. Um, Anytime we've asked about it, with the offense, Coach Quinn has gone to her defense. I don't think any of us doubted defensive ability, right? Um, her last game. Oh, you were on the other opposite end of the arena, but seeing two of those emphatic blocks in succession, like he's still. I'm not worried about her defensive ability. It's the offense, and again, I'm hoping that this game here is an upwards trek, as you mentioned her double, like her 12 points numbers last year. I'm hoping that she, from here on out, maybe we start to pick up on that number, right? And just going down the list, Erica Wheeler. I don't think I was too much of a doubter in our preseason shows, but I was a little bit like, I don't know, where do we fit here? Are you primarily a backup one? Like, are you going to slip in and play the two? And she's been huge. You talk about off the court and the chemistry there and playing better. How instrumental, like, how are you able to measure that? Um, with we like if like in baseball it's wins above replacement, right? It's how valuable you are. I want to know like how that would mark with Erica, not only for on the court because that would be fascinating as well, um but just like again, you can't measure chemistry per se numbers wise, but especially the video. Did you see, were you there for her post game?
Yep.
Right, like that's important. And it was weird to see Minnesota fans get upset about that. Like that was weird.
I didn't see Minnesota fans getting upset about that. Oh,
No,
interesting. No, didn't see that.
there was a few folks that were like laughing at her, and then a few of those fans from her team last year who were like weird about it, right? So I don't know, man. You want people to care about regular season. It's like partially why we have Commissioner's Cup, right? Like, I don't know. I thought that was weird that there were folks who were being bizarre about that. And, obviously someone who feels very, respected and appreciated here in Seattle. So, um, Erica's numbers are great. She's on, as Christian mentioned on last Storm postgame report, she's on pace for career highs in field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, boards and blocks. Wow. Blocks is not a number I thought I'd talk about with Erica, right? So yeah, again, you're starting five now because as Rowan mentioned, you texted us pregame the Minnesota game. Her starting is relatively new, consistently. Considering she made that start with AC out, but like it's the bench that I'm really concerned about. You and we've all talked about it with Lexi Brown. You traded for Lexi Brown. She's on a protected contract. She, as Rowan mentioned again when we were looking up our stats for this, she's got 3 points, and they all came from free throws on a 3-point play. Like that can't happen. You talk about 3-point shooting. You've gotten great shooting from um, Gabby and Nneka. Wheezy's had a few good shots. Skylar had hit a big three against Minnesota.
Nneka hit, I believe, one, just one. Nneka had a
I
three as
think as they were
well.
pulling away, maybe. Um, but like, if you want, like, so if those aren't clicking, all those players aren't clicking, as we've talked about, the concern for that, Lexi Brown's whole thing is that, and she's not doing it. You've given Zaya Cook some minutes, but as Rowan was talking about, like, she had a steal in the last game in like 4 minutes or something. It's not much.
Mm-mm.
It was a steal and a foul or something.
Yeah, I think she had one steal, one foul, no points. So
Yeah. Like, so it's like you go down the list of your bench. Who knows how long Lee Rue is here, or if like we just kind of like flatten over the trade request. And then there's Dominique Malonga, who, obviously everyone is excited about. I was remarking this to somebody. There was a Storm fan account online, Storm Facebook group that was upset. They were like, "Why didn't we draft Sonia Citron? Why like would have got an immediate impact?" I'm like, "All right," because just it feels like every game we see Dominique take more leaps, right?
mhm.
You obviously like, yeah, I don't know. What have you seen from Dom? Because again, it feels like every game there's like a sequence that I see from Dom, and it's just like you can see the greatness unfolding and growing. It'll come with time. But yeah, I mean, Christian talked about it again in our last Storm postgame report. There was that sequence where she had like 6 points or so, um, and was they threw her to defend Fee. And
Mm.
I think the numbers were that Nafisa Collier was 2 for 7 when Dom was guarding her. So it's like, it that was big from your rook. So I don't know. What have you seen from Dom?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to be just looking at the stats, comparing people on the bench that now includes Alicia Clark. If we're looking at bench points. I think that in these past, 4 games, 5 games, Dom has been, one of the strongest, if not, well, if not the strongest, person coming off the bench. She looks super comfortable. I mean, I even said that back in the what Phoenix game, I believe,
Yeah.
that she just seemed to have this confidence when you have Alyssa Thomas coming in the paint, you have Satu Sabali, Kalani Brown coming in the paint. She just looked very confident, as a 19-year-old rookie. And yeah, I mean, her offense is really starting to come. She's had a very, steady progression, but she had 8 points in the game on Wednesday, six before, six the game before, and eight the game before. So she's really consistently adding a few points that a lot of other people on the bench are not. I mean, you even have, Alicia Clark, who did start for a while. She hasn't scored more than 5 points in the past, 3 games. So I think Dom has been huge, in that. And I thought that maybe we wouldn't see as much of her minutes ramping up because, again, we know that Coach Quinn and her staff, it seems like when they get a rotation going, when they get, some different units going, they just want to stick with those units. But I've been very pleasantly surprised to see that, her minutes have been steadily going up. She's, played 12 minutes or, most of the past 4 games. So that's great. And I think that she seems to be really well adjusted, really well adjusted to this team. I think that she seems to be very comfortable. And I mean, she's shooting very efficiently, which again, for a rookie who's coming into a league that, obviously we know that she's played professionally for a long time. She's not, her talent level is not as young as her age might make it sound, but she, was 4 for 5 on Wednesday, against again an undefeated Minnesota team. So she was 3 for 4 against Dallas. So she's looking really, really good. And I think that she's been a really great backup to, when Ezzy Magbegor was in foul trouble on Wednesday. She, came in and there was not any lag in in just the way that they were playing. She came in and just kind of was able to, keep the defensive presence up. So I've been really impressed with her. I think that who were you just talking about? Oh, we were talking about Lexi Brown and Zaya Cook. Again, these are people that you really want to see getting some strong minutes in when they have the opportunity to. And I guess, now that we're into the Commissioner's Cup games, when you were talking about Minnesota people being upset, I have been seeing a lot of things about the whole Kayla McBride Erica Wheeler thing that happened at the end of the game and just seeing people talk about it. And I think a lot of people are forgetting that a lot of the Commissioner's Cup is having to do with points differential. So I know that, Kayla McBride seemed to be upset that Erica Wheeler made that layup at the end, but every point counts in the Commissioner's Cup. So, but yeah, I think that it's now kind of getting into the part of the season that, we won't see as many, free minutes for Lexi Brown and Zaya Cook to get in and get a little bit more comfortable. But, I've been impressed with, I think that Zaya Cook is doing enough right now that she's scoring pretty well. Her defense is pretty good. Again, on Wednesday, she really didn't make much of an impact really on either end. She had 1 steal, but no points. But in 3 minutes, how much can you do? But I think she's been, decent, adding some points when she needs to, but definitely need to be seeing some more production from the bench. And we were talking, off air before about, this game on Wednesday. You had, Leah Rue playing the day after she, put her trade request in. So it didn't seem like her minutes were necessarily going to be affected by the trade request, but then she was the only player not to see the court on Wednesday, which again, we were talking Minnesota's, a smaller team in comparison, but still interesting that we didn't see her at all, especially when, she is producing pretty well offensively, in terms of in comparison to some of the people on the bench. So, yeah, I mean, I think that we talked a bit about the trade request, and I think that really what they need is someone that can come in and continue the scoring that, Gabby Williams, Nneka Ogwumike, Skylar Diggins, are starting, with the starting group. Um, and the way that Lee Yuru has been playing, it's been great, but especially with Dom getting some more minutes, I really think that they need to be looking for a bench scorer that they can really rely on to continue the offense when the starters sub out. So I don't know. I mean, I think I'm on the trading Lee Yuru side at this point, just to hopefully find some remedy to the lack of bench points because again, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, and like on that, ooh, damn, on that last part, Christian mentioned, what if Minnesota wants more post help, like, or to get bigger in the post per se, do you risk making them better in training with them? It seems like some of the teams that potentially use Lee Rue would be teams that you would worry about going through. Minnesota, Vegas could certainly use
A
some
good
post
point.
help,
Yeah.
but do you want to send her to either of those teams? Um, yeah, I mean, again, I would have loved to, as like I've talked about, I think a few games ago, is like with Ezzy's offensive struggles, give Lee some minutes there to try and, because again, it sounds blasphemous, but it's like Lee can kind of do some of the things Ezzy can do offensively, like with, stretching the floor, um, and, just so
I
it's
mean, that's
tough,
a
but
good
yeah,
point. That's a good point too. That I mean, it definitely doesn't feel like the minutes that Lee has been getting is necessarily representative of how the Storm feel about her. I don't think it. I think, they talked about it when they traded for her, and they speak very highly of her and her ability. I just think, again, they're kind of in a weird spot where they just don't have enough minutes for anyone. So you make a good point of, do you trade her? Knowing that she is very talented and in turn will then make another team more talented, or do you, keep her, like, do you play defense or offense a little bit?
yeah, because I mean, from what I understand, four teams had reached out to Seattle. I don't know which teams they were, but you know, we hypothesized on that last Storm post game report that um that maybe they kept her out to trade her, but it's been 2 days, and as of 11:41, she has not been traded still. So you know, I don't know. It is interesting to look at that, but I guess my last piece on the bench is, yeah, it's like it's fun to see where Dom is right now, as you mentioned, seeing how she doesn't seem afraid to go into the paint. And just wonder, like, when we talk in about 10 games, what will she look like then? What will she look like at the 30 game mark? What will she look like at at the playoffs? So it's really fun to watch that, and why I'm not like worried about, because yeah, I mean, it's fun to watch some of the other rookies contributing right away, but it feels like we knew when it was the draft, like the potential is what Seattle's looking at.
I mean, it is
Um,
interesting too because, you have, when they drafted Dom, they didn't know that Ezzy was going to be struggling a bit offensively this season. And, when you look at, I was going to say unfortunately, but it's not unfortunate. It's just interesting that when you look at Ezzy's offensive numbers recently with Dom's offensive numbers when she comes in, they're pretty comparable when you have Dom, scoring 8 points and Ezzy scoring 12, but in more minutes. It's interesting to look at, that usually when you have a rookie backing up a former all-star, an all-star and defensive player, all defensive team player, you would expect, Dawn to maybe come in just for some, just to get some reps, but she actually is making an impact. And I think it's going to be interesting as the season continues if Ezzy's offensive production doesn't increase, how are you going to balance those minutes of, Ezzy obviously is, as Coach Quinn talks about a lot, she is doing a lot defensively. She's number three in blocks and, in the league. She's, top 10 in rebounds in the league. We know what she can do defensively. But if that offense isn't coming, who knows? If Dom got more minutes, we don't know what her scoring could look like. She honestly, at this point, just from what I've seen, she feels more confident scoring than Ezzy is to me. I mean, we talked about it at one point that, Ezzy's just seemed a little bit, to pass out of double teams, or like the other day she attempted a layup, got the rebound and passed it out when I feel like before she would have gone back up. And
Mm.
I'm just interested to see how that continues because, yeah, she looks pretty comfortable out there. Um, but I think that the trajectory of her, it's going up, and I hope that Ezzy's offensive trajectory goes up as well, but we'll see.
Yeah, because again, it's like as I talked about with those, you get the Skylar, Gabby, Nneka group, that trio just go up. You add Ezzy to that, and again, you just get more dangerous. Yeah, no, I would agree very much with the confidence thing on Dom because there was one sequence in particular where she got a rebound off of a missed shot that came off the front of the iron and immediately put it back up because she had the space.
Mhm.
And when she rises up, there are not many players in the league that are going to be able to get a hand in her face enough to disrupt a shot. So yeah, so yeah, and I was gonna like do concerns, but it feels like we've already kind of addressed concerns. Do you have more than what we've talked about?
I
I mean, outside of maybe
Why don't I
like
mean, I've
minute
already said my
management.
concerns. If you have any, I'll think about mine, but
No, I think it is just like the bench you've talked about. You brought up the minutes played for some of those top players. Is yeah, I would love to see Skylar, Nneka, and Gabby be able to get some more rest so that they can be good to go for the rest of the year and again a playoff run. Um, it is just yeah, I mean, you talk about so you get to the playoffs, right? I mentioned again, your starting five can go up with just about anybody. Playoff series test your depth,
mhm,
right? In a
sure.
long season also, because who knows what happens between now and then. Um, who knows if someone gets hurt, knock on would like you can't guarantee you'll get to the playoffs fully healthy. And even then, like we know players will play through things just to get through a playoff run. So it will be up to them to stand up at some point. So like as we've talked about with the progression of Dom, like I feel better game by game seeing her get minutes, seeing her in situations. Again, that third quarter run. It wasn't like the first quarter where it's like you're feeling out the game. That's the third quarter. That's an inflection point where Seattle goes on this run, is able to hold a lead a bit. Lexi Brown, like you play her at this rate where it's like a handful of minutes or less throughout the year, and you need her. Say something happens, God forbid something happens to Erica Wheeler,
Mhm.
and you throw her in essentially cold, like that's bad,
Yeah,
right? I mean, for a shooter, you want to be a rhythm shoot, typically, from what I understand. So it's worry. I mean, yeah, what if something happens to Ezzy, and if you've traded Lee, your post depth is what? Are you
right.
pushing Nneka to the five? Like, so I don't know. It is the bench is big in a lot of ways. You could like a lot of my concern can be tied to the bench, whether it's giving like minutes rest to your starters, what they actually produce, you know, what if the starters aren't able to produce, like then who are you relying on, right? It felt like so often with the bench last year, and this is a better bench than last year's bench,
Yeah.
but they are shorter. So yeah, I mean, no, I think we've already kind of all we've mentioned our concerns, I'd say, unless you've got anything else.
I don't think so. I mean, the only other stat that I wrote down that I think is potentially a concern. It's interesting to me that you have Ezzy and Nneka in the top 10 in rebounds in the league, but then the Storm is 10th in team rebounds in the league, which is really interesting, 10th of 13. So yeah, again, it's always so interesting to me how year after year after year we've heard rebounding being a concern. And then we also at the same time talk about the Storm having a really post-heavy team this season. So it's just interesting to kind of think about where that discrepancy is, I guess. Maybe just more guard rebounding, but I think that could definitely be something that could be improved. But again, I mean, last season, um, it kind of felt like at a certain point, Coach Quinn was like, oh, well, this has been a concern, but we're just going to focus on other things at this point and, not try and up that rebounding and try and, maybe do more offensively. Also, an interesting stat is that the Storm, they're ninth in three-pointers made in the league, but second in three-point percentage. So on the bright side, they're shooting incredibly efficiently. They're also second in the league in field goal percentage right now. So, very, very efficient shooting, which I'm sure that, no coach is going to complain about. But at the same time, you know, those three-pointers are still a bit of a concern. If you're ninth in the league, it's not the worst, but it's also not great, especially when, again, we've talked about at the end of last season, that was such an emphasis of what they were going to look for in the off season, and you're back at the same place that you were last year, essentially. So I think that, as you don't need threes. I know that, they've been really great at points in the paint this season. So, if you want to focus more on the points in the paint and less on the three-pointers, you can do that. But I think that any point, any category that you can get a little bit better in is a pro. And when you have people like Gabby who are more of your, more of your kind of can do everything kind of players. I don't know if you want to rely on her to keep your three-point through shooting up. And, like you said, it's looked better from other people recently. I think that, Gabby, it felt like at one point at the beginning was really carrying all the three-point load. And, on Wednesday it looked a little bit more distributed. But again, that's when you have, when you're passing really well, and I think that that just needs to be the number one priority is distributing well, because I think that that's how they won the game on Wednesday.
Yeah, I just worry about how much you're gonna ask from Gabby Williams. I know she can
Yeah,
handle it. I mean,
for
we
sure.
we we see she has no off season, but she
But it's
shouldn't
a
have
lot on
to.
anyone. I
She
mean,
shouldn't have to.
no, no. I mean, she's an incredible athlete. We see that, every practice, every game, but there gets to a point. You have 40 games in a season, in a regular season.
Isn't it 44 now?
Oh, you're right. Yes, I
So
still have
even
the
worse.
40. My God. Yeah, you're just proving my point.
So yeah. So all right, my friend. I know it's a little different because they're without what, three players at least.
I think I have the list here, so I'm happy to.
But yeah, what does Golden State look like? Because I mean, obviously there were a lot of questions about their draft strategy and their
Mm,
free agent strategy and everything that's kind of gone into that. But they've been fun. I mean, they've
yeah.
they've what they've beaten the Sparks twice, if I remember
Mm,
correctly. Um, like I don't, they're certainly an interesting team, as you and I joked about. They had Storm legend Alyssa Cunane on their roster in the
and Storm
during
legend
training
Stephanie
camp.
Talbot.
Yes, Storm legend Stephanie Talbot is still going strong with them. So I don't know what should you expect out of Golden State, because feels like I've talked about this on post game reports and with our round table, but there's never like, okay, this, like, check this box off as a win for Seattle, right? There's no guarantee. So I don't know what should we be looking for with Golden State tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean they've really impressed me this season. They're eighth in the standing so far when, we haven't seen an expansion team in the WNBA in years. And so I think a lot of people were just expecting them to float around the bottom, but instead you have, the team that's the lowest in the standings was a team that people thought was actually going to be way better than they are. But the Valkyries are 4-5 right now, which is really strong. I was at the game, the blowout win against Vegas, which was very unexpected. But I mean, especially in that game against Vegas that, I got to see in person, they looked really strong. I think that what's interesting about the league is that, you have so many things going on internationally. There's so much more talent internationally than I think a lot of people realize, because all that, we're hearing about are the college players, and we're seeing we have access, a lot more access to those games. And so I think a lot of people, underestimated Natalie Nakase when she was drafting a bunch of international players, and they have played really, really well. Especially the players like Janelle Salon, who, not a lot of people knew about before she came to the Valkyries. The downside that you were just mentioning, the downside to that is that, you have Euro Cup, and when you have a bunch of international players, they have to choose between, um, representing their country or, in the Euro Cup or coming to the WNBA, or staying in the WNBA. So currently their roster looks a lot different than even just a week ago when I was there. So I think it's a little bit of an unknown for the Storm, just because you have some players that are gone. Linskins, she was waived. You have Janelle Salon going to Eurobasket, who I believe it might be their leading, or maybe not their leading scorer on the team, but I think she's averaging 11 points. I know that. So she's been really strong for them offensively. So she won't be there. Julie Van Loo, the list goes on, honestly. But on the bright side, the players that they did sign to take those spots for the international players are all players that are pretty familiar to the WNBA. Letitia Ame was signed back to the Valkyries. She was incredible for them in their preseason game. I believe she had 20 points in the preseason game for them. So she was great. She's played in the WNBA for a couple of years, so there's definitely some familiarity there. Ariel Powers was signed by the Valkyries as well. She is someone that, everyone who has watched the WNBA for the past few years knows. She's, good scorer. So again, there's just a little bit of uncertainty, just because you haven't seen these players play in the system. But that, just knowing Ariel Powers' talent level, and same with Letitia and me here, what we saw from her in the preseason with the Valkyries, that they could present a good threat. So I think that if Seattle plays, I mean, honestly, if the Storm plays the way that they were playing on Wednesday, clearly they could beat anyone. They can beat anyone if they can beat an undefeated Minnesota. So, I think that it should be. I'm assuming that the Storm will win this one on tomorrow, but I would not count the Valkyries out. I think that Natalie Nakase has really showed how good of a coach she is, especially when coaching against her former boss Becky Hammon last Saturday, and beating them by a lot. So yeah, I think that it should be a good matchup, but it kind of could go either way, honestly.
Yeah, so we'll have to see. So hope you guys enjoyed this sort of like again Storm coffee table.
Valkyries roundtable.
Yeah, welcome back to the I had something
The West Coast minus the Sparks roundtable.
West Coast WNBA,
For sure.
around the W West Coast edition minus Sparks. Um, should have had Kelsey Plum.
I was gonna say
Um,
Kelsey Plum. Love it.
but
But
Kelsey
side
Plum
note,
would add
because
to the minutes thing because she like eats all
yeah,
of those minutes, so it would just make it. Yeah,
both of us are UW, covered the UW women's basketball team as well. It's very fun to see Kelsey Plum back in purple. I love watching the games, being like, "Oh, Kelsey, you look like a husky again."
back or they already did the dog camp. I was like, no Savia Sellers invite to Kelsey Plum.
That
What are we
was
doing? You were
that was
at.
sad.
So anyway, we'll get out of here till we see you next. But that's for the UW Women's Basketball Weekly show.
Oh yeah,
Um,
for sure.
whenever we get back to that, but it's been kind of quiet for them
Hmm.
outside of all the players just kind of posting like, "Love it here,"
Yeah,
and
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Avery
and
Howell
celebrating
looks like
Avery
Avery
Howell's
Howell's on
birthday.
vacation at the moment, so
Oh,
I'm
okay.
assuming she'll probably be coming to Seattle soon. So,
She's saving her buckets for the season.
oh,
So.
for sure, for sure.
All right. Well, yeah. So then we can, when we have our March Madness versions of the show this upcoming season. Yeah. There you go.
Yep.
Okay. Till we. Oh Jesus. Thinking about that team without the Leigh Daniels, I'm scared.
I
Okay, never
know,
mind.
I
I'm,
know.
I'm scared of myself now. Till we see you next time. Take care of yourselves. Be well. Do whatever you can to make today a great day.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, were you going to watch the Seattle Storm away games this year?
Away games. Well, Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports. So I was thinking of coming here if that's okay with you.
I think that makes a lot of sense. See you all here.